Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our US stock picking. And today we have, once again, FINANCIALmissy with us today. Yes, hello everyone. Yep. So if you are tuning in live with us, right, do give this video a like so that we know that you are here live with us. So today we are actually going to talk about this particular stock called Alibaba, right? So Alibaba has been making the news, for quite some time. Yep. Unfortunately, it's on the negative side of things recently, right? So, so today, we are going to break down for all of you to see whether whether this stock is worth entering on both the fundamental as well as the technical point of view, right? So without further ado, let me share my screen. I will start sharing for today. All right. Yep. So today, we are going to talk about Alibaba, right? The ticker symbol is BABA on the US stock market, right? So if you have been checking the price of Alibaba, you have realized that Alibaba has seen quite a huge price correction, right? It has actually dropped more than 70%, right, since 2020. So some of you might be enticed to enter, right, because it might seem cheap, right? So today we are going to break down for all of you to see whether it is a good time to enter, and what should we actually watch out for this particular stock. Yeah, but before I begin this session, right, don't forget to give this video a like, right, if you are here live with us. And as what I always do every week, right, I will first do a breakdown of our last stock pick, right, which is actually Alphabet, right, or Google, right, ticker symbol GOOGL, right. So if you haven't watched our last week analysis, right, do catch last week's video, right, for more details of our sharing. Yep. But if you have forgotten what we have shared, right, let me do a quick recap, right, of what we have actually covered last week, right. So this is actually taken from my TikTok channel, right. So I actually summarized that 7 things to watch out for last week on my TikTok video, right. So let me play this, and do a quick recap so that everyone can jogs everyone's memory. Right. So first of all, we pointed out this particular uptrend line, right, on the daily chart, right. It has been holding for quite some time before it actually broke, right. And we zoom in, right, it actually broke very quite recently, right, on 11 to 12 April. And it is currently also resisted at that time by downtrend line, right, as well as supported by this first horizontal support, right. Yep. And there were other support areas to watch out for, right, if that first horizontal support actually breaks. And we had that first horizontal resistance, right? If there's any upside, that's why we're looking out for. And as for the moving average, right, we did see that the 50 SMA was less than 200-day SMA, right? And last but not least, right, the seventh part was on the MACD, which was negative at that time. So let's quickly do a quick recap, right? So what we mentioned then on the bull and bear arguments, right? On the bull side, right, it was close to the horizontal support. And if there was some support, right, there could be a bounce in prices, right? But on the bear side of things, it's still trading below that downtrend line, right? It also broke that uptrend line that we saw, right, in mid of April, right? And the 50-day SMA and the 200-day SMA, right, is actually lower, right? The 50-day is less than the 200-day SMA. Last but not least, right, the daily MACD is still negative. So what we concluded last week, right? What we concluded last week for trading this particular stock is to not adopt a wait and see approach first, right? If the price actually clears the short-term downtrend line convincingly and the MACD turn positive, right? We can perform a scalp trading, right, on the long side, right, with the first resistance point as the first target price, right? If not, we do not enter any long positions yet. Right, so that's what we actually mentioned last week, and let's see, right, the past 5 trading days, how how has this panned out for Alphabet. Right, so here's the the updated price chart, right, on the daily price chart, right, for Alphabet, right, ticker symbol GOOGL. So first of all, right, let me show you that downtrend line, right? This is the same downtrend line that we drew last week, right? So you can see that, on this particular day, right, they actually broke this downtrend line, right? And that's actually on the 4th of May, right? But, thereafter, it actually quickly corrected down, right? With a red candle. And, after that, ever since then, it has traded below this downtrend line. Right, and, the first horizontal support that we drew last week, right? It is still being supported by this level, right? In fact, it hasn't really gone below that yet, right? It still applies, right? So this is still the horizontal support to watch out for, right? The first horizontal resistance, right, at about 2520 to 2525 US dollars, right? It was previously the support, right? So the last week of trading didn't touch that level, right? It didn't test this level at all. And as for the moving averages, right, similarly, right, for the last week, right, the 50 SMA continued to be lower than the 200-day SMA. So there's no change to that. And you can see that the MACD, right, it continued to be negative for the week. But you can see that, the gap is closing. And very recently, right, the past few days, it looks like it's going to cross over to the positive region. Right? So this is something you might also want to watch out for, right, if you're thinking of longing this particular stock. Right. So what can we conclude, right? So if you actually followed, that trading idea last week, right, you probably wouldn't have entered a long trade, right? Because, although that downtrend line was broken, right, on the 4th of May, but we did see that the MACD was negative all the way through, right? So it did not turn positive, right? So we didn't enter a long trade at that time. Right, so but there is still some bullish indication for this stock, right? There could be a chance that it might turn bullish, right, in the near future. So what to look out for, right? I think there are some pointers that I might want to offer to all of you, right? In case you are actually thinking of trading or investing in this particular stock, right? So first of all, the MACD, right, on the daily chart, right, you can see as what I pointed out earlier, it seems that it's going to cross over to the positive region. So we need to see the confirmation of that occurring, right? If that occurs, right, it could be a very bullish indication, right? It could actually indicate that there is going to be an impending reversal, right? And we also want to see that breakout of that short-term downtrend line, right? It did break out on 4th May, but it wasn't sustained. So we did need to see that it's sustained, right? And he has to break out convincingly. Right, and of course, we have to see that first horizontal support, right, that has been spotted so far, remains supported, right? If it does remain convincingly supported and remains strong, right, we could see a bounce in prices, right? So if all this happens, right, we could apply that same trading idea that we mentioned last week and the same target price, right, at the first horizontal resistance level. Right, so this is just my own opinion, right? Please do your own due diligence because the market is very volatile recently, right? There could be sudden news in the market that might skew things, so we do have to watch out, and be very careful. Right, so that's a quick recap and a quick update of our last stock pick, right? And if you are still here with us and enjoying what we are sharing so far, don't forget to click that like or love button. Right, and without further ado, let's move on to today's main topic, right? Today's stock pick, which is none other than Alibaba, right? Ticker symbol BABA. Right, so we're going to talk about the particular stock listed on the US stock exchange, right? So actually, this is dual listed, right? But we are focusing on US stocks, so we shall focus on this particular stock on the US stock exchange. Right. So here's the overall price chart for Alibaba, right? So basically, it is quite a few years for this chart from 2020 all the way to now, 2022, right? So you can see that it has grown, it has increased in price quite significantly in the past, right? Hitting a high, right, of 319 US dollars, right, on the 27th October 2020, right? That was actually its all-time high. But ever since then, right, it has corrected back down. Right, you can see a smooth downtrend all the way till now. right? So if you actually bought here, it'd be quite a painful ride for you all the way through, because currently now the last closing price was only $90, right? So if you work out the math, it was a whopping 70% down, right, from $319 to $90. And the big question here, right, is why, right? Why did this happen, right? Isn't this a stock that has immense potential, right? Why did it actually drop so significantly? So let's look at some news regarding this particular stock, right? So this is taken from a site called Seeking Alpha, right? And it's mentioned here that Alibaba has dropped 69%, right, since its 2020 peak, right? So they are analyzing whether this stock is actually finally become a buy, right? So what happened, right? Why did it actually drop? So I guess this is not something new to all of you, but just in case some of you might not know, right? So basically, right, there was increased scrutiny, right, by China in terms of their regulation, right? So it actually affected a lot of Chinese stock, and Alibaba was also not spared, right? So it actually because of this reason, right, this was one of the primary reasons for it to actually lose ground, right, and continue to decline. Right, in fact, right, this article gives more detail, right? Basically started with the regulatory crackdown, right, by China authorities, right, and there was also another reason, right, in terms of revenue growth worries, as well as they couldn't really settle this, with the Chinese authorities, right? So it has been dragging along for quite some time. And if we look at the fundamentals, right, on the revenue growth, for one, right, it in very recently, right, in February this year, right, the company actually released quarterly results, right, that showed its slowest revenue growth, right, since 2014, right. So that isn't something very positive, right, because it might seem that the company is stagnating, right. It might seem that the company might not be growing. And if we look at the sales, right, the sales actually rose 10%, right, from the previous year. Even though it rose, but it was below analyst prediction, right? So it was below market expectation, and that could have caused some selling pressure. And we look back, right? There was this particular IPO, right? It was pretty hyped up at that time, right? If you recall, there was this IPO of Ant Group, right, on Hong Kong, right? But it eventually didn't occur, right? Because of the Chinese regulations, right? So this has actually been delayed indefinitely, right? So this is also another negative reason, right, for Alibaba to actually drop as well. Right. So these are some of the reasons, right, that caused this particular drop since 2020 up to now. And if we look back at a very, very recent instance, right, in fact, this is just a few days ago, right, on the 5th of May, right, yeah, actually, the Alibaba actually, fell quite a fair bit, right, and this was actually because, right, there was this particular news, right, or particular rumor, right, that China had actually detained a man, right, surnamed Ma, right. So there was no concrete evidence. It's just some report saying that China detained this person, right? And anyone associated him to Jack Ma, right? So yeah, further details, right? It's basically there were some reports, right, that this individual named Ma was actually detained, in Hangzhou, right, on grounds of national security. And Jack Ma, right, being the founder of Alibaba, right, some people might associated that he might be the one that is being detained. Yeah, but eventually, right, the news came out after that, right, to clarify this, right, and it was mentioned that the person detained, right, was his spelling was 3 Chinese characters, and we all know, right, Jack Ma is only has only 2 characters in his name, right? He's called Ma Yun, right? So definitely this guy that was detained was not Jack Ma, right? So after that, it kind of confirmed that this was fake news, right? So the losses were erased after that. Right, but nevertheless, right, there was this rumor, right, very recently, right, that caused some price volatility, right, in Alibaba. Right. So that's a quick look through, right, of some of the recent news for Alibaba, right? But let's take a look at what's the future direction, right, of Alibaba. What's there in store for Alibaba with all these in play, right? So to do that, right, I'll look at some of the technicals, right, as all these technicals will offer some hints, right, of what the future might bring for Alibaba. Yep, but before I do so, right, if you're enjoying our sharing so far, right, do click on that like or love button, right, so that I know that you are enjoying our sharing so far and finding value from our sharing. Yep, and without further ado, right, let's check out the price chart, right, for Alibaba for more details. Right, so here's the daily chart, right, the zoom in version for Alibaba, right? So over here I plotted some lines and some indicators, right? So not to worry, I'll go through one by one with all of you. So first of all, right, I'd like to point out this uptrend line, right, uptrend line down here, right? So you can see that it has been forming higher lows recently, right? And it is supported by this uptrend line. So that's something you need to watch out for, right? We need to see whether this uptrend line actually continues to hold, continue to remain strongly supported. Right? You can see that in recent times, right? Because that particular article of Jack Ma, so-called Jack Ma being detained, but eventually it was not. So it actually fell here, right? But it hasn't really touched this level yet. So we need to see whether will it actually hit this level and will it actually bounce back up, right? So that's something for us to watch out for. We need to see that this level is strongly supported, right? If so, right, if it's convincingly supported, there could be a bounce back up. Right, but if not, right, if there is still some negative or bearish pressure, right, for this particular stock, right, we could be seeing other support levels coming to play, right? So first of all would be this first horizontal support, right? It was tested previously, right, at about $81 to $82, right? If this doesn't hold, right, we could be watching this for the second support level, right, which was tested previously down here, right, about $73 to $74. So this is something for us to watch out for, right, if this uptrend line does not hold. Right, and the downtrend line, right, so you can see that this short-term downtrend line, right, has been the point of resistance for recent times, right? It has been tested here, here, and here, right? So we do need to see whether it can actually break past this line eventually for greater upside, right? Or would this continue to be the point of resistance, right? Eventually, for it to break into a new uptrend, we want to see prices going for higher highs, right? We don't want to see continued lower highs being formed, right? So we do want to see a breakout for it to reach a new uptrend, right? So this is something to watch out for, right? If it eventually convincingly breaks, right, we could be seeing a new uptrend for this particular stock. Right, and if we actually see that convincing breakout, right, of that downtrend line, right, then we could be watching out for all these other resistance level. Right, so first of all will be that first horizontal resistance over here, right, about $103 to $104, right, that was tested previously, right, before actually it retraced back down. So that's the first resistance point to watch out for, right. Then the next, right, second resistance will be about $110. We used to be the support level previously, right, and the third horizontal resistance, is corresponding to somewhere around $113 to $114, right. This was also previously, the support level as well. So these are some of the levels to watch out for, right? Some of the short-term resistance levels to watch out for if we see that downtrend line breaking convincingly, right? And the MACD, right? This is on the daily chart, MACD, right? The positive sign, right, is that it is positive, right? It is in the positive region, right? But, in recent time, you can see the gap is narrowing, right? The bars are becoming shorter, right? So that is a bit of a concern, right? We do want to see this continue to be positive with increasing gap for it to actually, reach further upside, right? But if the gap, continue narrows and eventually goes to the negative region, then there could be more selling pressure, right? There could be bearish momentum coming in, right? So we do have to be mindful of this indicator as well and continue to watch this MACD closely. Right, so that's some of the indicators, right, you might want to watch out for Alibaba. So to summarize, right, there are both bull and bear arguments as usual, right, for this particular stock. But on the bull side of things, right, it is still supported by the uptrend line, right, that we drew, right, but we don't know for sure whether it can still remain supported convincingly. Right, the MACD positive, right, but I did mention that the gap is narrowing, right, so that could be a concern, right, and we still haven't seen price going for higher highs, but it's still trading below that downtrend line. So what should you do for trading? Right, at this point, once again, I'd like to emphasize that this is my own opinion, but please do your own due diligence, right, before applying this particular idea. Right, so in my opinion, right, as I think for this particular stock, we should still adopt a wait and see approach first, right? We still haven't seen a confirmation yet, right? So if you're thinking of going long, right, or basically buying the stock first, right, and selling at a higher price, right, we want to see that uptrend line being convincingly supported and the MACD remaining positive, right? Right, and if the downtrend line is cleared convincingly, right, we can continue to add positions, right? Add positions to our long positions, right? And eventually take profit, if you are a short-term, more of a short-term trader or a mid-term trader, right? We can take that profit, right, at those 3 horizontal resistance levels that I pointed out earlier, right? The first, second, and third horizontal resistance, right? But if you are investing, right, you might want to take a target price at a higher price, right? So that is really dependent on your time frame. Right, and if not, right, if we do not see this happening, right, we do not enter a long position yet. We wait for confirmation, right, because the market is volatile. You never know whether this might still be a falling knife, whether this might actually continue to fall down further, right. So we do want to see the support being held convincingly, right, before we actually enter a trade. Right, so that's just my own views, right, of Alibaba, right? And if you like our sharing for today, right, don't forget to click that like or love button, right, as well as share this video, right, so that more people around you can benefit from our sharing, right? And if you haven't done so already, right, you can follow us on our social media pages, right? My social media pages are over here, but I have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok accounts, right? And FINANCIAlmissy has hers as well, right, on Facebook and Instagram. And also, do leave a comment down below, right, on what you think of our sharing, right, and also and share, what and suggest, right, the next stock for our next sharing. So, for those of you who are tuning in for the very first time, right, we do hold these sessions every Sunday, right, at 4 p.m. So this week is on my page, and next week will be on FINANCIAlmissy's Facebook page. Right, and with the current market volatility, right, I also like to share this particular steps, right, my 7-step guide, right, with all of you, right, so that all of you can actually better manage, right, this particular period of high volatility, right. So I'll paste this link right after this video ends in the comments, and you can download it for free, right. It's on my PayHit store, right. There's absolutely free, right. You can just download it as and when you like. And last but not least, right, I have another session tonight, right, at 9:30 p.m. Right, so today, I'll be talking, I'll be talking on cryptocurrency as well, right, on this particular Facebook group, Crypto vs NFT Investor, right. It's an open group. You can just join if you're free, right. So today I'm actually going to talk about, the recent, development last week, right, on the interest rate hike, right. So if you follow the news, the Fed has actually raised the interest rate, right, last week, right, and it was the biggest interest rate hike in 22 years, right. So how would that impact, right, your stock and crypto holdings, right? Should you buy or sell now, or should you actually wait? What should you do, right? What's next for stocks, US stocks and cryptocurrency, right? So if you are interested to find out more, right, you can tune in tonight, right, at 9:30 p.m. Right, and with that, I've come to the end of my segment, and shall now hand over the time, to FINANCIAlmissy, right, for her perspective on Alibaba. Right, over to you, FINANCIAlmissy.
Yo guys, thank you so much to Trade Engineer for sharing with us his valuable insights on Baba. I mean, for you guys who are here with us, right, I can see that there are some of you guys here with us, how many of you guys heard of Baba before? BA, or in long, Alibaba. If you guys heard about Alibaba before, just type in the chat BA, please. I just wait for you guys to type, yeah? Right. Oh, Sharon Tan said thanks, technical engineer.
Oh, no problem. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks for tuning
Oh,
in.
hi Hong Hong. Hi Han Hong, right? So yes, Baba is a very exciting company that I love. I really love Baba, just that it's a bit on a downside at the moment. So without further ado, let me just share what I've got with you guys so that you guys have a better insight of what is Baba, how is Baba doing right now. Just give me a while. Here it is. Okay, let me share my screen. Yeah. I need Engineer, I need you to help me process the screen. Yeah, thank you. So first and foremost, this is never intended to be a financial advice, yeah? So anything that I'm going to share, anything or everything that I'm going to share with you guys today is my own personal views and strategies, yeah? In no instances should it be exerted upon or at a point as a financial recommendation or advice. So please, as usual, I always say the same thing, week after week after week, please do your own due diligence because I'm always wrong, right? Act on a strategy that fits you guys the most. All right? Okay, without further ado, what is an indicator for the past few months? Look at this particular chart itself, yeah? So week on week, I've been updating this particular chart, and so far, it has not broken what I predicted it to be, which is on the consolidation phase. The upper line, the upper dotted black line is the ceiling, and the bottom black line is the support, right? So on Friday itself, we see a like a cross. We call it a doji. Why is it a doji? Because the body is small. All right, as you can see, it's a very long thin line with a very small body. We call that a doji. And what does a doji is essentially means, right? It's very simple. Normally, when you see a doji, it will mean that it's either going to break up or down. We do not know which way. There's no clear indication of which way the market is going to go on Monday. All right. So for investors out there, traders out there, if you see this doji, just be very careful that the market might pan out very differently on Monday. All right, or rather on the next day. Okay. So far is actually moving pretty much on the bottom resistance line. Sorry, the bottom support line, and whether it will really break out the bottom support line for sure, we wait and see. All right, guys. Okay, so very excitingly, the trade engineer has been sharing with us about Alibaba Group. It's so exciting about Alibaba. Well, truth to be told, I'm actually invested in this company, and of course, with the last 1 year of the correction, yes, of course, I'm losing money on Alibaba, but I'm still very convicted with Alibaba. Let me tell you guys why. So on Friday itself, Alibaba unfortunately closes at $90.05, 90.05. Oh my god, it's actually a very it's very cheap and it's very attractive price. But also we saw a 4.58% drop. All right. Am I going to go in Alibaba anytime soon again? My clear answer is wait to the end of this presentation. You know my answer straight. Okay, so Alibaba, look at this success story of Alibaba itself. Look at the logo itself. It's so exciting. This particular Alibaba designed its logo in a very exciting way. At first sight, you see a face, okay, which means that it represents people, customers, clients, whatsoever. All right. And if you look into the logo itself, you see a face that is smiling. Very strong branding, I would say, right? And look at the company business model itself. Alibaba, right, was actually formed, right, in Hangzhou itself, in a small apartment in Hangzhou. Okay, so it has 18 founders in Alibaba, of which, of course, is led by Jack Ma, so his name is the biggest. Yeah, Jack Ma has retired, but Alibaba has 18 founders and has actually expanded into a lot of different areas, right? Okay, Jack Ma itself, right, he's able to bring Alibaba to such heights because Jack Ma himself is a very visionary leader. He has a vision and he brought people to that vision. You can't have a business with a leader with no vision. The business wouldn't work. So Jack Ma himself is a visionary. He brought people there. And the business model of Alibaba is very simple. Alibaba acts as a middleman between the buyers and sellers online. Alibaba do not own any physical stores that will actually incur additional charges and what's not. Okay, Alibaba works with China domestic wholesalers, which also implies that they can actually, lower the pricing of production and stuff like that. And it expands into the international market whereby it exports to everywhere, anywhere and everywhere, right? So Baba itself has a very strong um business model, and economic mode of Baba itself is so strong that it is hard for people in China to replace Baba with something else. Yes, of course, there's competitors like Huawei, there's competitors like Pinduoduo or JD. But in terms of business model of Baba is still one of the biggest and strongest, right? This part, I believe that the trade engineer has already covered already. Baba has gone through a very volatile period over the past 2 years. Okay, we got the Chinese regulators trying to find Baba for anti-monopoly probe, affecting the Ant Group IPO and new anti-monopoly rules and a lot of fines. Okay, eventually leading to like fake news lah, like what the trade engineer mentioned. But essentially, right, what I want to bring across is Baba is a Chinese company, and with all Chinese company alike, is subjected to a communist ruling. Okay, so if you guys wants to invest in Baba, you need to be very, or in any Chinese company, you need to be very convicted about your investment because anything and everything can happen, as you can see, as you can tell, right? Be very safe there. Whether it's safer to go for Hong Kong Baba or US Baba, essentially it's the same thing because it's still Baba after all. But it can get more volatile if it's a stock listed overseas. Okay, China has already suggested that they want to end regulatory storm over big tech companies, and there's also news that says that China is negotiating with the US to allow independent audits in companies that listed in US, so on and so forth. But so far, nothing concrete yet, and this kind of discussion can take years. So are we going to see volatility in more years to come? Perhaps. Okay, so just be very safe. Be very cautious over that if you guys are investing in any China company, right? Okay, so what does Baba do? Everybody should know what Baba do, right? It's like Baba. So for people who doesn't know, it's a technology infrastructure that helps to market reach to merchants, brands, retailers, and other businesses to engage their users and customers, regardless of whether in China or internationally, doesn't matter. Everywhere, okay? The reach of Baba is like so strong. Even my mom, who is 60 odd years old, uses Baba, right? See that reach over there, all right? So it has a lot of different segments: core commerce, computing, cloud computing, digital media, entertainment, innovation initiatives, and others. There's a lot of things Baba do, but essentially, let me just put a very brief and broad overview is Baba, this company, brings sellers and buyers from the initial stage, like the sellers trying to list on the platform or buyers wanting to buy on the platform, all the way, every single detail, Baba is able to actually handhold and bring and streamline the whole process. Okay, e-commerce, logistics, cloud, everything, and streamline. How many companies are able to streamline to this extent that Baba does? Of course, you would say Amazon. Yeah, definitely. In fact, Amazon is another company that is very high in potential. And if you guys have actually followed on the Amazon news and charts, you'll see very attractive prices. Okay, but that being aside, Amazon being a US listed company in the sense that it's a US company, let's separate it from there from now. Baba itself is a very strong Asia China company. Okay, this is also why I am very confident in Baba moving ahead, even though there's a lot of negative news and all, but I felt that Baba potential is still intact. The company business model has not changed, even though there's some management changes and Jack Ma has already left. But Jack Ma is still at the back end. That being said, I'm not sure that I should say it or not, but I guess there's certain conflict between Jack Ma and the Chinese government. So I guess there'll be more volatility in this company as compared to other companies. Okay, I shall stop at here before I get sued for anything. I don't know. I don't want to go to in-depth as well. All right, so just read on more to gain your own understanding of the internal conflict between key stakeholders, the Chinese government, and as a result, the stock prices. All right. Okay, how does Baba do financially? I guess everybody should know because it's Baba. Baba is a very strong company. The financial statement is actually really very good. Everything is very strong. The net profit margin has actually been brought down significantly because of the recent change in events and stuff like that. So the net profit margin was much lesser. If otherwise, everything is actually in Baba is actually quite strong still. All right. And in terms of valuation, intrinsic factor of, in the intrinsic value of Baba itself is actually 259, of which you can see that Baba is actually very much undervalued at this particular point in time. But am I looking at entering Baba? We look at technical analysis. Okay. Based on this Baba chart itself, right, you see that for the past 1 year, actually more than 1 year, I started this chart from 2018. All right. And this is not a daily chart. This is a weekly chart. Why do I want to point a weekly chart to you guys? Because weekly typically represents a longer time frame as compared to daily. If should I do a daily chart right now for you guys, you will see that it's actually a steep decline for the past 1 year plus or so. So what does that represent? Nothing much. So let me just pull out a weekly chart for you guys so that it's much more clear. Baba all the while has a very strong fundamentals that lead Baba all the way up to $320, right? And that was the highs of 2021, where COVID rebounded. All right. From the period of 2020 to 2021, there's actually this tech bloom. So I wouldn't be surprised that the price of Baba actually flew sky high, and thereafter you probably want to correct to a more reasonable pricing, which is closer to the blue and purple line. However, if you look into the chart, right, early in late 2021, you see the blue and the purple line reversed, which means to say very simple moving average, 50 over 150. The 150 is above, the blue is above purple, which means to say Baba is in a bearish mode. All right. And if you look before that, in 2021, early 2021, you will start to see weekly on weekly on weekly, there's a decline. Okay, not just one huge red candlestick, there are multiple red candlestick decline. Okay, and how many green candlesticks appreciation do you see? Not really, not many. And none of it is so, and very little of it is so significant, so solid that you see a long green body. Most of it you see reds, right? So for any investors out there, if you guys are looking at investing in Baba, I mean, I certainly would love to go into Baba, considering the price is so attractive right now. But I need to really emphasize this, yeah. What is currently the bearish mode, right? That goes lower can go lower. All right. What is higher can go higher. Just imagine that if you think that the rebound, I'm not sure that I can show any lines here. Okay, never mind. Just imagine, right, that you see the after the highs in the okay in about maybe March 2022 thereabout. If you look at that high, right, you think that Baba has actually rebounded and entered Baba, right, when it's actually very obviously that it's on a downward momentum. Should you think that Baba actually rebounded and enter Baba at 200-ish? Look at the price now, it's 90, right? And if you think that at 90 Baba is going to rebound upwards, right, is it possible that Baba goes 80? Why not? Right? So please, if you guys want to invest in Baba, enter Baba, at least wait until there's a confirmation that Baba has a reversal in trend, right? What goes lower, what goes higher has more potential of going higher, okay? And it's very important to do your own risk management should you want to enter Baba. Baba, after all, is a Chinese company. Risk management of all Chinese company or investing in Chinese company, it is very, very important. All right. So please do your own due diligence on how are you going to play Baba, or whether you are going to invest in Baba. All right. So this is all that I have for you guys. Yeah. So did I change my slides? Okay, never mind. So okay, do like and comment and share this video if you guys think that it's actually helpful for you guys. I'm having my upcoming webinar that I'm going to talk more about the risk management, and also how do we evaluate, very clear cut evaluate on a company, okay, and enter a company based on this 3G analysis, and also basic entry or exit rule on the 20th of May, 8 p.m. All right, with of course a bonus at the end of the session if you guys do join me on the 20th of May, 8 p.m. So do sign up the QR code over there, and I will see you guys on the 28th. And last but not least, I promise some of you guys that I'm going to actually, talk about some fundamental analysis sometime. So I'm actually planning to do it next Friday evening at 8 p.m. So just a reminder, just tune in to my page on next Friday evening at 8 p.m. for the fundamental analysis. If otherwise, I will see the rest of you guys on the 20th of May, 8 p.m. to talk more in depth on how we can invest profitability with guaranteed profit and manage our risk at the same time. All right. So that's all I have for you guys. I hope that you guys enjoy our sharing.
All right. Thanks, FINANCIAlmissy. Thanks, thanks everyone for tuning in today. Right. Hope everyone has gleaned something, valuable, right, from our sharing today. Right. And yep, it's been quite some time, right? It's been 40 plus minutes, so it's been quite a long time. Right. Yeah, thanks Sharon and Han Hock, right? That's how I pronounce your name, right? Han Hock. Thanks both of y'all for staying with us all the way for today. Right. Hope you have gleaned something, right, from today. And do suggest, like, any stock that you would like us to talk about next week. Right. If you have any burning US stock that you like us to break down, right, you can leave it in the comments, and we shall break it down for you all next week. Right. If not, right, Tesla. Okay. Actually, I think we did Tesla previously, right? But we can do it again. If everyone likes to do it again. Yeah. We can do a more updated analysis, right, for Tesla, right? Since they have also released some latest earnings, right? So there could be some update. So yeah, we can do an update on Tesla, right, for next week. No problem, Sharon. Okay. Yep. If not, I think we've we shall call an end for today's session. Right, thanks everyone for tuning in today. Right, have a great remaining Sunday ahead. Right, and happy Mother's Day. Right, for those of you who are celebrating Mother's Day.
Right. Happy Mother's Day. I totally forgotten about it.
Oh no, that means you are not celebrating for your mom.
Oh, I bought my mom a flower. I just forgot to wish people, our viewers here. Right. So it's nice
Okay.
meeting you guys here and spend Mother's Day with all you guys here. Mothers or not, it's really a wonderful evening with all of you guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yep. And for those of you who are free later, you can tune in to my sharing session, like on stocks and cryptocurrency, like over at the Cryptoverse NFT Investor Facebook page, right? So if not, like see you everyone, right? And have a good Sunday, remaining Sunday ahead. Bye bye.